Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in today's episode, we are discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses, Chapter 19.
Chapter 19.
Oh, we were just going back through our notes for this chapter, guys. There is so much in this one. So much in this one.
A bit rich. So the paint supplies have now arrived.
Yes.
But Tamlin hasn't let her see them yet.
Yeah.
First, he has something else for her.
So the first thing that he does is he shows her the gallery. As he opens them, I love this. The breath was knocked from me. And we basically have an entire page of just her experiencing the gallery and him watching her experiencing the gallery.
Yeah, I love that he appreciates that now there's finally someone there who appreciates it. Because for years, it was just all locked up because it's like, I don't even bother to clean that. Nobody even cares.
Yeah.
And now there's someone who cares.
Yeah, because it's like, it's not his thing, but it's hers. And she feels so deeply, and she looks at all this, and I love this idea of like the things that deeply move us. Though I have to say, friend, I like the idea of being a person that's deeply moved by art.
I'm marked this because I'm like, I love this. I wish this was me. So she's like, oh, the hand I'd put to my throat sliding down to my chest where my heart roared with a fierce sort of joy and grief and overwhelming humility. Humility before that magnificent art. Never been there. But I was there one time not with art, but with like the way the sun was hitting this red leaf on a Japanese maple tree at Descanso Gardens in the Japanese, and I was like, I wasn't conscious of any of this. I just stopped and had tears streaming down my face seeing the sun light up this. Yeah. So that's as close as I can get. That maple leaf for me, which was like 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. So I'm assuming it's like a similar thing for her with art. She's just like,
and it's so interesting. Like, it's interesting to think about those things. And I would love, for those of us in our community where, which by the way, these podcast episodes, again, our thoughts, the point is we want to hear your thoughts, so go comment. But like, I'm curious to hear what moves people and like if people are moved by these things. Because I don't feel like for me, it's like one thing where hers is our paintings, right? And like, and it's going to be just across the board. But the same thing, I've had moments, but it's not usually art. It's not usually museums. I love the idea of going to museums and looking at art, but usually I'm just walking around and I just feel really tired and I'm like, I'm not liking this. But, okay, back in the day, did you watch So You Think You Can Dance?
yes. Those are fun.
There was one season of that where in this one season, I think there were 3 different performances that actually like moved me to tears. Like something about the music and the dance where like you have those moments where it connects really deeply. And I know people who I feel like have that experience every 3 seconds. There are some people who just feel really deeply. Like that's not me.
When I'm pregnant, that's me. That's so me when I'm pregnant.
There's a commercial. But I remember experiencing it then. I remember, I've had moments like this, but they're not as often. There's actually, so we're in Southern California, down in San Pedro, San Pedro, that's by Long Beach. There is and I think if it's every week, basically there's one day a week where there's this little part of the old town area where there are a ton of little artists galleries, and you can go through and look at them. Have you ever gone and done the artist walk?
Not that one, no.
Okay. I forget when it is, but everybody opens their doors. And so, having a daughter that's interested in art, there was a day that we drove down there. There's also a thrift store down there that I really, really love. And so we go to it, but we went and we looked at all the artists, and, a lot of them were cool. And I would find stuff. I'm like, that's really neat. That's really interesting. But there was one artist studio, and when we go down there, I always go in and I look at the same pieces. Like they're not things that I can afford right now, and I don't have any place to put them. But they're not paintings. And And they're not exactly sculptures either. And I'm not going to do them justice. But she has a number of pieces where, like, whenever I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I actually feel moved. And I just kind of want to sit here and, like, be in the presence of this. So one of them was, it was a glass box. I mean, it's fairly large, but it was like a glass box. And inside of it, there's this sculpture of a person, like, pushing on the wall. And, like, the wall that it's pushing on is starting to crack. Right? So you see this person put inside this, like, glass box and, like, trying to break out of it. I don't know. It was just like there was so much emotion on the face, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I just resonate with, the emotion behind this piece. There was another one that I'll probably get wrong, but it was like I think what was it? Was it like a slingshot? Like on one piece, and then, like, in the other piece there was like a target, but it was things like wealth or beauty, and it was sort of representing the kind of like the crapshoot of, like, what you're born into, right? It's like you don't get to decide, like, where you're born or your height or your, what stratus of society you're born into, and how much of it is, like, left to chance, in these things. And just, she had this way, and they were these big pieces where I feel like they needed to have, and some of them were very large, and some of them took up space, and they were interactive. They were super cool. So, like, occasionally there are pieces, that I find, but they're fewer and further between. Same thing where I can, like, go back. I'm like, oh my gosh, there was a piece of art, and I felt something, and I feel very proud of myself for it. Where other people are like,
something while looking at art.
Yeah, I can imagine people being like, that happens to me like 4 times a day. Yeah. Just like, do you not have that when you look at the sky or the sidewalk? No, I don't. But I love that people do.
Yeah, I appreciate that about other people.
Oh, but this is Feyre. So this is a thing that moves Feyre deeply. And I'm always interested to hear, like, what moves other people. It's very seldom art for me, but like music and movement actually often is more for me. Okay, and then at the end of this little section,
I began to paint.
I began to paint.
Yes.
Weeks passed. Okay, days melting together. I painted, most of it awful and useless, never let anyone see it. But she moves into the space where this is now the primary thing that she is spending our time doing. And we start to see her, falling into a little bit of a pattern here. Where she can't wait to get up and jot down these things, and Tamlin's called away a lot. And she's just happy when he returns safely.
Yeah.
And I love this line here. I slowly stopped being so afraid. And it wasn't, and we've seen this has been happening ever since she arrived, but safety, this is never a thing that happens all at once. It was a slow thing over the course of weeks where she stopped being so afraid. And she doesn't even say, like, afraid at all, just not so afraid.
Yeah. Less.
Oh my gosh, this is a topic that I talk about a lot. I won't go too in depth to it, but are you familiar with the concept when people talk about felt safety?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, that was a term that I didn't come across until, until I started studying trauma. I've always been such a logical thinker in my life. There was just, like, situations where you are safe and where you're not safe, and really understanding from a nervous system perspective that it's not really about whether you're actually safe or whether you're not. It's whether or not you have a felt sense of safety. And the first author that I heard, who was that? Was that Waking the Tiger? I don't know. It was one of these early books on trauma, one of the first authors to really describe that. And they're like, it's not one thing. They're like, it's not just emotional. It's not this. It's like there's these 8 different components that have to come together to create a felt sense of safety, and how important and vital that is. Anyway, so we've been talking about this, but it reminded me of this because nothing has changed in how safe she is.
Yeah.
She's, at all. From the day that she arrived in Printhia, she was exactly as safe as she is right now. So her actual, literal, factual safety is the same, but she couldn't feel it until now. She had to go through these layers. There had to be things that she experienced. She had to get to that place. And I experienced this over the weekend. So over the weekend, I had a handful of different experiences where I was in different situations with different people. And I was just paying really close attention to how safe or unsafe I felt to be myself. All right, which is a theme that we've been talking about. Because that's the thing that's been on my mind, because it's the thing I've been working on. And there was a situation where it was interesting. I'm like, okay, I feel anxious going into this situation because I don't feel safe. And I was like, okay, but I think I actually am. And I was contrasting when it's like a false neuroception, when I feel unsafe to be myself and I actually am safe to be myself, and when I feel unsafe to be myself and I'm actually unsafe, and sort of navigating all the things between there. But it was funny going into the thing. I'm like, I think that I'm like, my poor husband, as I'm verbally processing this, I'm like, I feel unsafe, but I think in this case, I actually am safe, and it might be a good exercise to show up and actually be myself. And then we hung out with the people when we came out. I was like, oh no, I actually think my neuroception was pretty accurate because they're kind of judgmental, right? And he was like, yeah, a little bit. Because I'm like, I was like, okay, I got it. Because we're in this space right now where we're not quite sure what's happening with our life, like and everybody keeps asking like, what's next? What's next? Because we did this big Airstream adventure and then we were transitioning and everybody's like, what's next? What's next? And we still don't know. But it was fascinating to notice. We had dinner with some friends recently. And we told them, they're like, so what's next? And we're like, we don't know. And they were like, oh my gosh, I love that for you guys, right? Yeah. Such an adventure, such a great thing that you're doing. And it came from this place of having such a high regard for us. And like, well, obviously you've thought through it. Obviously you've been thoughtful. Like none of that was in question. Or like birthday hang the other day, it's like, oh, well, if anybody's going to navigate that well, it's you. And I have these people in my life when they say, what are you doing next? And we say, we don't know. And they're like, oh my gosh, well, one, we know you're going to walk through that well. And like, what a cool adventure. And then this other situation where it's like, what's next? And like, we don't know. And people get that face of like, well, have you thought through that?
Have you spent any time thinking about what you might do next?
Do you realize you have children who need stability in their lives? You know what I mean? Like those kinds of responses. And it was fascinating because on the other side of it, I was like, oh, the fact that I don't actually feel 100% safe to say everything. Now, one, the truth is I actually am, like that it's like, I still want to show up in those situations and be a person that says the truth and is honest, because the most I'm going to receive is judgment. I'm not actually unsafe. But I was like, oh, that person actually is kind of judgmental. So the fact that I don't feel like 100% at ease is actually accurate.
Yeah.
All that to say, the more that I get in there and I'm constantly like looking at these things and pulling them apart, I trust my nervous system a lot more than I used to. But I do still have these experiences where there are situations where I actually am safe and I don't feel it. And giving myself permission and giving myself time, like Faye did here, that moving to a place of felt safety is not a thing that just because you logically know you are, that you can suddenly expect yourself to then feel it. It's a different experience and it takes time. But as she starts to actually feel it, not just know it, like she's known in her head she was safe for a while, but as she's slowly starting to actually have a greater felt sense of safety, slowly feeling less and less afraid, what she's able to, here's what was interesting, what she's able to process that we see on the next page. Because I think when we're in survival mode, it's like what's important to us and what we're able to work through. But as she is working through here, she has this understanding of she's going to look for a place to paint, and the breeze blows through, and then suddenly she remembers her family, glamored, cared for, safe, still have no idea where I am, and the mortal world, it had moved on without me as if I had never existed. A whisper of a miserable life, gone, unremembered by anyone whom I'd known or cared for. Gosh, and she has a moment here. She doesn't go writing. She doesn't want to paint. And I feel like there's a handful of layers here where she really is struggling through this.
Because she's making it up though. like this is just her take on it, because she does at the end of that paragraph say, like a stupid, useless, obedient human. So she's back in that she could be painting and enjoying herself, and but then no one would remember me. Well, maybe no one would remember her, or maybe everybody will remember her back home, and
and that's like
projecting it.
there's so many layers to this. I mean, so many layers to this, which is what I appreciate, because it's so true. On the one hand, she's frustrated here for not thinking of them, and she's a little bit like, Tamlin let me forget them, and he's like, maybe it was even this distraction, maybe this way to get me to stop complaining, stop being a pain in his ass about wanting to see my family, or maybe they were a distraction from whatever was happening, in his world. And he's like, I'd stopped asking. I'd stopped asking, like you said, yeah. And there's this self-judgment there for sure that's coloring all of it, but I think maybe also like a moment of herself of like recognizing, gosh, it was easier to just not think of all of this. And as we go to the next page, and she has frustration, like it finally comes out at the bottom here, where that she shares that she feels so tremendously ashamed of herself for leaving them. And she doesn't really understand it. She's like, I don't understand why it feels so selfish and horrible to paint. I shouldn't feel that way, should I? I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it. And then going into all those years, what I did for them, and they didn't try to stop you from taking me. There it was.
It was the giant pain that cracked me in two if I thought about it too long.
Yep. And then, coming back to this, like all of these things of like recognizing that believing the Puka's illusion didn't make sense. Gosh, I don't know. There was just like a depth of this that like this has been hurting her since that night, right? That like this beast comes, and we've got Nesta, who's protecting Elaine but not Feyre.
Yeah.
Neither of them are trying to stop the beast, and her dad even being like, okay, well, yeah, take her, but like, hey, if you get away, like escape. And this has been the painful thing, that like they didn't try to stop him, and she's been carrying it around. Now, initially, I think she just didn't have the capacity to deal with that. It was like survive.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like this is lower on the agenda. And then we're moving to this place of out of survival, like feeling safe.
Yeah, and it all comes up right where she's like, it's really happy moment. It's like, oh, when we wandered his grounds on lazy days, the High Lord, whom I was happy to talk to or spend hours in comfortable silence with. It's so different from how she felt towards him when they first got there. So it's like, as soon as she gets into that, and she says, maybe it was the lulling of magic that clouded my thoughts. And then she goes into this really dark space where and then she's like just hating on herself. She's like, oh, I let him erase me. He'd offered me paints and the space and time to practice. He showed me pools of starlight. He'd saved me like some kind of feral knight in a legend, and I gulped it down like fairy wine. I was no better than those zealot children of the blessed. Like she's just like, everything's so, oh my gosh, this is horrible. How am I letting this all be so great? I shouldn't be doing this, right? Should I?
Oh my gosh.
The word should is like 15 times in this little paragraph done.
And some of it, I'm like she's
horrible.
all over the place right here, right? She's all over the place right here. And I love Tamlin. He's like, you seem upset.
Your hair is clean. That's one of his moments.
Oh, he's very, very articulate kind of place. But this is one of those things where like she needed to get this off her chest. She needed to say it out loud. She needed to express it. And even though there's a part of her, I think this was the thing that was interesting. This happens a lot in coaching sessions with people where there is a space where I think so many people these days understand that there's power in positive thinking. There's power in like managing their thoughts, and like, okay, well, this, this doesn't make sense, so I'm just not going to do it. But there becomes sort of a glossing over of what's really there. And I'll have people in session and they're talking and they're like, okay, well, I was thinking this. Okay, no, okay, I realize I shouldn't think that. Like, that doesn't make sense. And they want to like move on really fast. I'm like, well, okay, hold on. Like, hold on. Like, I know in your regular life, there are times whenever we need to be functional, but I'm like, these spaces, like coaching spaces, I need you to be unevolved. Like, I need you to show up in these spaces, not like this isn't the place to like let me manage my thinking. Like, this is the place where you need to,
Yeah, let it all hang out.
yeah. I'm like, it's like if there's a, like, sometimes like you need to like lance the boil and like get it out. And sometimes, and I think that was, and I've recognized this for my own life where there are times when I don't even necessarily have to work through it. Sometimes it just needs to be purged.
Yeah.
Like, we just need a minute to say it, and it can be all over the place like this, like hers, and she's even got some judgment of like, maybe I shouldn't be this way, but like, this is the thing. And like, here it is. And like, you get it all out. And there's something so healing about just getting it out. And, and she's in judgment of it, of like, oh my gosh, this self-pity's absurd. But he's like, no, he's like, if it grieves you, then it's not absurd at all.
Such a good Tamlin moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Such a good moment.
being there.
Just to be like, yeah, like if these are all your feelings, they're yours, they're valid, just get them out. And like, and it's fine and it's good. Yeah. So I think she just needed to have this moment where she just, this is like this thing that hurts me and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. I've been carrying it around and like, I just got it out and I lanced that boil and I said it out loud, which by the way, I've found doesn't really work with like, I'm a huge fan of encouraging people to like write things out and do like thought dumps. There are certain things that I don't think that works for. Like some of these deeply painful things, I think they need to be said out loud to another human.
Yeah, it's true. Because sometimes that will be like if I'm in a group coaching program and I've done the work and I've written it out loud and I'm like, no, I'm good. I did the work. And then somebody's like, no, would you just mind sharing yours? And then I read it out loud and I'm bawling at the end of it. And I'm like, I didn't cry when I was writing it, but something about saying it out loud, holy nuts, does it ever just release all kinds of stuff that writing can't bring up for me.
Exactly. So there's power in this. And I think, and it's one of those things I have to remind myself of because again, there's sort of that like independent strength. It's like, no, like it's fine. I can just manage it on my own. It's like, nope. There needs to be spaces where we show up and it's like, this is hard and this is painful and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It's a thing that hurts and like, can I get it out?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful healing moment for her to be able to say all that in front of him and then have him be like, no.
Yeah, and so he he lifts his bleeding hand and he kisses her palm, which was really sweet.
I freaking love a good palm kiss, by the way. This is a really hot moment for me.
Is it?
Palm kisses? Oh my gosh.
See, I'm
so
like,
good.
I have a tendency to keep my hands in
granny pose
fists.
My granny always
a lot, which means that they're always like a little sweaty. And that's why I'm like, oh, don't kiss it.
Don't kiss my
Don't kiss it. It might be a little gross. It kind of depends on the day. So I'm like, ooh, like what kind of, some people have hands that tend to always be like non-sweaty. Mine are either ice cold or they're sweaty. I don't know. That's so funny. But yeah, but anyway, but she definitely has a moment here too. Because she has a
he took the
pounding in her core.
Other hand to his mouth and kissed it too. Kissed it carefully in a way that made heat begin pounding in my core between my legs.
We're getting to these moments.
Here we go.
We're getting to these moments. But then,
A bit of steam.
We have this moment of one of my favorite moments here.
Tamlin's best line ever.
Don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy.
Amen, Tamlin.
Thank you, Tamlin.
Preach it.
Preach.
And then his other great one. Why do any of this, she says, and he leaned in closer, so close that I had to tip my head back to see him. Because your human joy fascinates me. The way you experience things in your lifespan so wildly and deeply and all at once is entrancing. I'm drawn to it even when I know I shouldn't be, even when I try not to be. That's nice.
It's so nice. Yeah. And it's such, it's such a shift here from her like, I feel, her really understanding that she has this weird sense of guilt over painting And it's not just about the joy of painting, it's related to this deeper pain, like everything's so complex, but shifting to like don't feel bad about what brings you joy, to him even shifting to like your joy's like fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And seeing this sort of three levels of her understanding it, from a place where she can see it as being difficult to, okay, well, don't feel bad, to also here's this place where like I think it's fantastic and wonderful, and her having a chance to see it in a different light. Oh man, but sweet, sweet romantic moments here. I love this. Like, he came in slowly, giving me time to pull away and brush his lips against my cheek.
Soft and warm and heartbreakingly gentle. I love the heartbreakingly gentle part. It's so good.
It is. It really, really is. Yeah. And so they have these moments. And going into this next one, it's funny. We're like, oh, this is such a sweet moment. And she's like, mortification.
Lingering mortification.
Lingering mortification.
Which, of course, comes right on the heels of not realizing that I craved his warmth, his nearness, until he was gone. Lingering mortification
Right?
over what I'd admitted. Goes straight.
And also what she's like, what had changed between us? Like, her really acknowledging that things have changed, for sure. And so she needs a minute. She goes out into the woods by herself. This is one of my favorite scenes, by the way. This is a good moment. And she has set a trap for him, and he's dangling upside down. And I love this, like, upside down, cruel human.
That's what you get for stalking someone. So good.
Oh, so they have a fun moment here. They have some more, and then he cuts himself down, right? That's pretty impressive.
Claws.
And then he pulls out the series of 5-lined poems.
Oh, yes.
Where we find out that he is good at writing dirty limericks, and that he's written some for her based on the words that she was figuring out how to say. And so again, after so much time where everything's so painful, they're laughing together.
I tipped back my head and howled, my laughter like sunshine shattering age-hardened ice.
Ugh.
She's laughing hard now. She's doing some laughter yoga.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice, right? Just to have the ability to laugh, and we're seeing
hard.
her. Gosh, she's moving out of this place where things have been difficult for so long. And again, really sweet moment where he's able to again show that like he does not see her illiteracy as a shortcoming, and just this really, really thoughtful, which by the way, like that was a thing that like, so such a transition from dirty limerick poems to chronic pain. That's a totally like logical switch.
Of course.
Really, really logical switch.
Work for Farrah, not for you.
Totally. But okay, so I dealt with chronic pain for ages, for such a long time, and because I was in acute pain, like pain that was like originating like in my joints for such a long time, and then because I was actually like dislocating joints every single day, experiencing that, the pain pathways in my brain got very, very strong. And so then there was a place where I'm experiencing pain that is, it wasn't acute pain that was due to injuries in my body. It was neuroplastic pain, basically meaning my brain had learned to be in pain, and then it was experiencing pain because it was used to that. And which, by the way, for anybody out there who deals with chronic pain, like there is zero part of me that's going to be like, oh, this worked for me, it works for you. Like, no, I don't do if it worked for me, it works for you. And pain is a complicated thing. But what I do believe is all pain is real. All pain originates in the brain, no matter what's going on. But I do know that neuroplastic pain is a real thing, where the brain creates pain signals when there is no actual issue in the physical body. But a huge part of that was, part of the healing process is learning to be able to experience pain and not react negatively to it. Because what most of us what happens is we experience pain and we go to, that's bad, right? And then it's sort of like Pavlov's dog. Like it's like pain is bad. We tense up. We sort of have thoughts about it that it's this terrible thing, and then we create a relationship with the pain that kind of teaches our nervous system that it's an unsafe thing and creates this big long cycle. And it's a very interesting process of learning to retrain the brain to experience pain and not then see it as this really terrible thing that we become obsessed with. But part of it was like, one of the techniques is being able to be in pain and be like, laugh. It's like, can you be experiencing it and create sort of a more like lighthearted relationship? Can you be in a place where you are simultaneously conscious of experiencing pain and experiencing like lightheartedness or humor or laughter? It's a very interesting process, but uncoupling that place from like, if I'm experiencing pain, oh my gosh, it must be like terrible or wrong. So that's kind of a deep thing. But all that to say, like, there is something to be said for just being able to laugh at whatever we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And so for her to have this relationship with like, oh my gosh, my illiteracy it's so embarrassing. I can't let anybody know about it, to we're like dirty limericks and laughter and like, oh wait, here's a situation where we are loosely talking about the fact that I do not know how to pronounce these words, pairing it with laughter and with lightheartedness and with humor. I think there's some deeper truths for healing there, but
Yeah.
good Tamlin moment.
Good Tamlin moment.
Oh, good one.
Yeah. And then right before that, actually, there was one. Oh my gosh. I just love this description. As he's still hanging upside down, before he cuts himself down, she runs his fingers through his hair gently, carefully. He purred, that's a pretty. If you're gonna have a male who's half man, half beast, that's got to be one of the best things, is that he can actually purr. Because a purring cat, that just feels so good.
It does. Well, and it's evidence that she may actually be able to train him with treats.
Definitely. Definitely.
And he may perhaps actually like to be brushed as well. She should try that.
Definitely might.
I mean, if he's actually liking the stroking his regular hair, maybe he would like the fur brushing. Like, maybe there's more to that should be explored.
In a fanfic. Someone needs to write that fanfic. But the sound of his purring is rumbling through her fingers, arms, legs, and core, which leaves her with this thought. I wondered how that sound would feel if he were fully pressed up against me, skin to skin. I just love how her brain jumps to that. He's purring. How would that feel if we were... I like that. Having never been with a male who purrs, I think it's a good question, Sarah.
It's a valid question. And I mean, and I love that we're starting to see, again, I love all those little moments where their relationship is shifting. Okay, super fun. So they have this great moment. And then, okay, so we shift to, they're walking out of the park and they're talking about the concept of a mating bond. Okay, so she's starting to learn what that is, and more about his father and some of Tamlin's history. Which is super interesting. And I think the next part that really stood out to me was where he's talking about how, other High Lords are trained from birth in manners and laws and court warfare. And I love it. When the title fell to me, it was a rough transition. And that, he says, many of my father's, how do you say, did you say courtiers? This is one of those ones I always read and I've never said it out loud.
Courtiers?
I don't
even know.
I don't know either.
Oh.
The amount of books that I read that have like courts in them where this word comes up, and I've never actually said it out loud. Courtiers.
I'm assuming. I've never thought about that.
I have no idea either. Okay, those people. And defected to other courts rather than have a warrior beast snarling at them. Okay, and so he shares this, that he's calling himself a warrior beast and realizing that like other people have seen him this way, which for her calls back to the half wild beast that Nesta had called her. This was, I don't know, it was such an interesting moment. I think that so many of us, like we have painful moments, and the tendency for all of us to feel like the pain that we've experienced, the shame that we've experienced, the negative self-talk that we have, when we hide it, it's so easy to believe like we're the only one that's ever experienced that. And I tell you what, it's one of the reasons I love group coaching programs. I love it whenever, business women like pull back the veil and like talk about what that's actually like. And to get to see that like, oh my goodness, things that I thought were just mine, things that I was so embarrassed of, things I wouldn't want anybody to know. It's like, oh, other people experience this too? Oh, fun. Like, and the normalization of things. And it's part of why, like, as a coach, like why the idea of being like a therapist where there are like rules about like don't share your personal experience with clients. I'm like, how does anybody learn? Because I think part of releasing shame is understanding, like being able to normalize experiences that we have. It's why I love group coaching. It's why I love getting to hear other people's stories, because as soon as we realize like what we're experiencing is a normal thing that other people experience, it's so much easier to drop the shame, and it's not a thing that we have to hide anymore, which is big picture. But here for them, like for her just to have this moment of, here's this thing that I've experienced that I thought was so unique to me, and here's like a completely different context of somebody experiencing almost the same thing.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, maybe we can be friends because we understand each other. Oh, but I love this. She's like, well, they're idiots if they can't see it.
They're idiots.
Okay. What are those? She's looking at unlit fires.
Oh,
okay. They're setting up bonfires for Calanmai or Calanmai. And we realized we learned how to say that at one point and then forgot.
I think I call it Calanmai, and I remember that I say it wrong. So therefore, it's probably Calanmai. But I'm still going to call it Calanmai.
Regardless,
it
means fire night.
Fire night. That just sounds so fun. How can she not be invited to freaking fire night, damn it?
Okay, we got a little foreshadowing here. We've got some fun chapters coming up, guys. But she's like, okay, and she doesn't know, what does Cala Fire Night celebrate? That's what we're just going to call it. Cala Fire Night.
Cala Fire Night.
And I love this, like where he rubs his neck. It's just a spring ceremony. We light bonfires and...
The magic that we create helps regenerate the land for the year ahead. How do you create the magic?
It's a ritual, but it's very, very. I love this. Like the he clenched his jaw and continued walking. And so he's obviously keeping some stuff from her, and she knows that. But his biggest thing is like, if you see fairies, stay away from them. Anyways, this whole situation again is one of those places where this would have went better if there would just been more open communication. But
for reals, but less story.
Less story.
But jeez, come on. Okay, communication.
So cannot wait to get to this biggest thing. But am I invited to your ceremony? No, you're not.
Definitely not.
And for whatever reason, he's like trying to keep his claws contained. And because there's this lack of explanation, she's like, though I tried to ignore it, my chest caved a bit. Gosh, and again, for somebody who already has like a negative story about herself, where now those of you who have read the future chapters, having read the future chapters, like we get the benefit of a couple chapters from now, we understand what this is about. Just that place where like in the moment she doesn't understand what it's about, so it's just a thing that's like hurtful to her, due to a lack of understanding of what's happening. But he's snarling, he's baring his teeth in a low snarl. Stay hidden. Oh, no, wait, this is a different one. So that sort of thing.
This is when...
So there's a tense silence between them about this, because this isn't, and the conversation is awkward. But then suddenly we have a transition here where he bares his teeth in a low snarl. Stay hidden, no matter what you hear, don't come out. And then he's gone. Okay. Ooh, this scene. Where we now have... her, again, this is one of those places where she's overhearing this conversation, and she doesn't, like, most of it doesn't make sense. And I remember reading this the first time and being like, none of this makes sense.
It makes sense till you're rereading it, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah, when you reread it, it's like, it's so clear. But this is why I had to like read this book and then immediately go back and reread it, because I'm like, wait a minute. But anyway, so we also have Another mention of this she.
She who holds your fate in her hands. With one word, she could destroy this pathetic estate. So we know whoever she is, we don't want to meet her. And I wish I could tell you that you're never going to meet her. Where can I meet her?
Yeah.
I don't want to meet her.
And she knows that, and we know Tamlin's really angry. They're really upset. And at the end, they're wanting to know, like, what did you hear? And she's like, I mean, she heard a lot, but she's like, nothing I understood. And she's like, and I meant that, like, none of it made any sense. She just couldn't stop shaking. Something about that voice had ripped away the warmth from me. And so there's obviously, this is one of the things where we are getting this indication that we're having these moments of playfulness and limericks and starlight pools. And it's this reminder of, like, there is one, this blight, that she's heard of, but then there's also all of this mystery of, like, there is something else going on here. And it's a stark reminder that
we're not in Kansas anymore.
We are not in Kansas anymore. And there are other creatures, nightmarish creatures that do exist. And we know that this is now the Adder. And enough that these two are scared and frustrated, and she's just not quite sure what to do with all of it.
I don't feel good about it.
I don't feel good about it.
My heart is pounding a little bit right now. I'm like this is why this is how Sarah J. Maas hooks you in too, right? Because you get to the end of this chapter and you're like, well, I can't stop reading there. Even though it's 11:30 and I need to go to sleep, I have to read another chapter because I can't end there. Even though the spring breeze whispered that I didn't want to know. Like, ooh. Quick, right. Let's read something else and hope that this next chapter ends happily.
Oh my goodness, there is so much more going. There's so much more coming and about to happen, but so much that she doesn't know yet, that we're all gonna find out about soon. I can't wait.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of A Court of Transformation and Awakening, and we hope that you will join us, if you have not already, over at ACOTAR, ACOTAA.circle.so for the deeper magic. Dive in and see what you can find. We'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.